Well, it's winter time. It's time to work on your kayak, maybe upgrade your stuff, maybe upgrade to a new kayak. So we got a good topic here. And I like this because I don't have the experience that you have with ice fishing and stuff like that. So this is going to be cool to talk about. We're going to talk about fish finders today. Of course, myself, Jonathan, I work here at the shop for ecofishingshop, do a lot of the install stuff. JT, he's the man behind the scenes, I would say more than anything. But I really like the fact that you're going to give some ice fishing knowledge to us about fish finders, man.
All right, sounds good. We'll get into it, and I'll explain why I'm not very good at it.
Man, JT, we've been slacking on these podcasts, and I'm excited to get back into it, back to talk fishing, talk all this. Of course, like I said, my name's Jonathan. We got JT here. Travis, he also jumps on here from time to time. But like the title, hooked, we want to be the kayak angler's resource. Whether that's, buying from us, not buying from us, just giving you guys information and putting it out there. But we're going to talk fish finders today. So I'm excited about that. JT, what was your first fish finder that you remember getting?
It was the Garmin Striker 4. And honestly, there are times where I go out and I will probably still use that because I very much, some of the places I fish, it's just I need depth, whether there's weeds below me and what the water temp is for the most part. But then I also just purchased last winter the Lowrance Eagle Eye 9 for some forward facing. But I've learned a lot in the last year about where that's useful, where it's definitely not useful. I always come at things from the standpoint of thinking about how you fish, where you fish, what you want to accomplish while fishing, and not buying overkill. And I'm kind of at that point now in the middle ground with the Lowrance Eagle Eye 9 where do I step up for more of a picture of what's going on down there, or do I just go back to the Garmin? I kind of am at a weird spot. But you mentioned ice fishing, so that is where forward facing sonar is actually really, really fun and can show you exactly what's happening below you. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I went out with my buddy who's got LiveScope, and we did side-by-side comparison, and it's pretty clear there's a difference. They both work, but what you're seeing for structure and what's going on below in real time, it's night and day. But I think maybe first, let's kind of just jump into, we've done this episode before. I think we kind of did very rudimentary what we talked about. I think we should almost define the three big things when you're looking at fish finders: down scan, side scan, and forward facing sonar.
JT's got a note here. Define chirp. And I told him, to be completely honest, I didn't know exactly what that, means. It's compressed high intensity radiated pulse. So basically, in layman's terms, that your chirp, your transducer sending a signal out, it's pinging back, it's collecting that information, and then it's giving you that information. So kind of dumb it down, it's just giving you kind of an idea of what's going on down below. So again, all these fish finders are going to use something similar where they call it chirp or down scan or down image side scan or whatever. It's kind of there. Now they do run at different frequencies, and to me, if you're getting into those higher end, more hardcore stuff, you may consider looking at some more of that frequency stuff. I know there's a couple different ones that they run, but honestly, we just want to keep it simple, just basic stuff, kind of go through everything, and kind of what we go through here at the shop. I know, you've talked to me about fish finders. We've had customers come in and talked about fish finders. And typically the first question I ask them is are you wanting down scan? Are you wanting side scan? And are you wanting forward facing? Those are kind of the questions that we ask just to get them into a lane and then kind of go from there. But it's pretty simple. Down scan is you're shooting directly underneath the boat. It's a cone, kind of is what they would call it. Your side scan, of course, it's scanning out to the sides of you. And then your forward-facing sonar, your live imaging, your LiveScope, your mega live and all that. That's going to be actually pointing out forward that you can actually pivot and turn. So don't complicate them, just make them simple, and figure out what speaks to you. What was the Van Hunks that you had, the very first one?
The Van Hunks pike. Yep.
So like that was a prime example where I always recommend customers to do a down scan, because they could actually mount that transducer inside the kayak. It was protected, but then it still gave you the ability to have, a fish finder on with you.
Yep. And that's what I did. And so like down scan, I think, is pretty much your most basic fish finder, like scanning that all of them have. So that's kind of your universal, like down scan every, like even your basic model. I think that the Garmin Striker 4CV or whatever it was that I had down scan, and chirp. I think side scan, do you have some experience with that? That's a little bit more like, I know my buddy who runs LiveScope, and his boat also runs side scan, and he'll use his side scan to see more what's going on, and then almost go back with a pass with his forward facing to get an even more clear picture. But I don't have much experience with side scan.
Yeah, so just like, you've got that cone that's going to shoot down straight, what it's doing is it's shooting out to the side, and it's giving you it's taking that image and kind of laying it out flat for you. So the kind of cool thing is, like, on, say, like brush pile, standing timbers, a lot of times you'll see that tree, but the way you're seeing that tree is you're actually going to see the shadow behind it. So like, here, if like, here's the light, the shadow that's behind it is actually what you're seeing, because it's shooting it out, it's pinging off of there, and then you're kind of seeing the shadow. The nice part about side scan is, just like you talked about, is like you can use your side scan more when you're moving, and you can adjust that width out as far or as shallow as you want. Now, typically what that goes off of is your depth. Typically you want 3 times the amount of depth. So if you're in 10 foot of water, typically you want that 30-40 yard width.
Okay.
Because if you're getting too far wide out, then it just kind of gets distorted. It gets kind of weird. Now, most of these fish finders will have a setting where it's like on auto. Out the gate, it's probably going to be set up on auto, where it's automatically going to adjust that depth for that down scan or that width for that side scan. The nice part about the side scan is you're going to be able to see brush piles, standing timbers, rock piles, different stuff like that a lot better. Typically, if your unit does have mapping on there, you can go back on there, click that spot on where it's recorded, drop a waypoint, and then you can come back and fish that spot. So it's kind of nice being able to go back and forth between your down and your side. I know a lot of people use down imaging, and kind of probably similar to ice fishing is, jigging or drop shotting, different stuff like that. A lot of times you'll see, like on down imaging, those fish will look like spaghetti, because kind of moving, especially like schools of fish and stuff like that. So like you can actually drop straight down to those fish. So again, part of that, kayak specific, like some of these boats, like Hobie's, for example, they have that tray that goes up and down that you can lower that unit to get that side scan. Some of these boats don't have that ability, so sometimes your side scan is not going to be as clear. You could do side kicks as far as yak attack to mount that transducer, but figure out what you're wanting to do. What's your goals? Like, do you want to be able to sit on a brush pile and crappie fish? You may just want the down. If you want to cover a small body of water and scan the whole thing and then mark stuff and go back and fish it, you'll probably want side scan. But I think those are two. And so like you'll see like Garmin, like they'll say the size, the CV is the clear view. That's going to be your down imaging. What is it called? The SV, that's going to be your side view. So that's going to define which one of those units can do which. Typically, if they can do side view, they're automatically going to do down, and so forth. So like Humminbird, I've got this pulled up. Humminbird is the SI, which is side imaging, or they have the DI, which is down imaging. And so that's kind of what, in that name, they're telling you the size of that screen, they're telling you what it's capable of. And then going forward, your forward-facing sonar, a lot of your units, some of them are compatible, some are not. It's all kind of based on those units, but you can, filter those to say, hey, I'm going to have forward-facing sonar, whether it's now or a year down the road, and you can look at that. But that's where I would start out, looking at all three of those based on how you're fishing.
Yep. So side imaging is like I mentioned, is the one that I don't have a ton of experience, but you explained that really well because I think that's how a lot of my like bass angler friends will use it. They are cruising and side imaging, and they're trying to map out like those brush piles, that timber, um, so that they can circle back with their forward facing and see what's going on. So that was a good way of explaining that.
Sometimes that unit is based on the transducer that it comes with.
Yep.
So sometimes getting to that side imaging is just upgrading that transducer. So maybe you do have that eagle eye and you say, hey, I want side imaging. Maybe I just upgrade that transducer before upgrading my entire unit and changing that all up. So yes, for sure. Like there's definitely different levels to that. And to me, like, I don't think you can go wrong with side scan. I think once you go side scan, you're going to have to think about how you're going to mount that to your kayak. Of course, every kayak's different. Old Town, they've got a really good mounting system. You could buy like the Yak Hobby transducer adapter that keeps it, above the bottom of the boat, but still down enough to do side scans, different stuff like that. So you definitely got to look at that, which we can probably go into a whole nother series as far as mounting accessories and all that stuff.
But then let's talk about like obviously the big one and is forward facing. So that's Garmin LiveScope. That's Lowrance Active Target 2, I think is what they're on now. And then the Humminbird Mega Live would be your 3 big ones for that.
Yeah, so depending on how you feel about LiveScope, the cheater box or, whatever you want to call it.
That's in my notes for later too.
To me, it's just another tool. But again, this is going to be able to, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to put that transducer mounted, but typically people are either putting on a trolling motor or they're putting on a pole itself. And that way you can actually scan that area. Now, the upside of the forward-facing sonar versus your side and your down is that forward-facing is typically a quicker or more, I wouldn't say live, but it's as live as you can get it, image of what you're looking at, whether that's a brush pile, a fish, whatever. Where the side and the down, it's typically delayed as you go. It's collecting that information, it's laying it out for you. So like you may cross by a brush pile, but you're not going to see it until you're, back past it, but you can still mark it. That's the nice part. Like it can triangulate that location and mark it. So like forward facing sonar is probably the newest, latest, greatest. To me, it's not for everyone. I think it's one of those things like you've got to, just like down and side, like you've got to invest that time into that. To me, like I didn't have it at first, so I really learned my down and my side, and that was huge for me because at that point I could see stuff better with my side and my down because I'm not using my forward facing as if I'm cruising to a spot or something like that where I'm always looking at that down and that side. But the nice part is you can use that, then go use your forward facing sonar and then look at. I would say the upside is since it is a quicker live, faster you get more information quicker. So you can see a group of fish and tell if it's crappie, if it's bass, if it's white bass, kind of based on how they're reacting, how they're moving. And again, that comes all just time on the water, getting that dialed in.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's not for everyone. What I will say is like, I've got thoughts on it. Cause even here I live in Minnesota, like the DNR is collecting information from people right now. And like, there's a consideration in changing daily limits because of it, just because I will say it does help. Like you are very actively being able to see, especially in ice fishing, like, oh, they're around, they're coming up to it. They're not interested.
Yeah.
And you can just keep switching in real time until you figure out. So like you are getting way more information. It can, but what I will say is like, it's not necessarily going to help you catch them. And like, it's not going to help you find, you still need to know the lake. You need to know fish behavior. Like there is still like, I think that's what I just went on a recent ice fishing trip and we were sitting in a shack and had my buddy had his LiveScope 34 set up. So we were, you can see in down mode for ice fishing, we were in 20 feet of water. We could see 14 feet each way. So really across 14 feet, you could drill as many holes as you want and you can watch all of you ice fish, but it was 4 of us in a shack next to each other. And I bet my 2 buddies caught 40 fish to my 2. And it was just, admittedly, I lost my cool. I was very frustrated. It's really hard. I'm happy for my buddies, but gosh, it just sucks watching them reel up crappie after crappie after crappie. But it was like, clearly the information they were getting, their technique is what ended up catching them. It's like, if I would have sat there all day with that LiveScope, it wouldn't have made a difference, even if I was by myself. So that was a little bit humbling, but we can jump into my experience with the eagle eye. What I have found is I fish for pike. I fish the backwaters of the Mississippi a lot. I'm in 8 to 15 feet of water. A lot of times it's dirtier water in the backwaters, depending on if there's rain, and a lot of weeds. I stopped taking my eagle eye with me after 2 trips.
Yeah.
Because just forward facing wasn't really giving me any information that I could even use. You know, I could visibly see the weed lines, and you want to fish the edge of them when you're casting for pike or bass in that area too. So that was also a learning experience too. Like deeper, clear water will give you a much better picture. I plan on using it for walleye this summer in like 20 to 30 feet of water. I think that'll give me a way better idea of what's going on there. But
And I mean, at the end of the day, like your fishing is just important as your equipment, you know. So like knowing kind of seasonal patterns, kind of stuff like that, but also trying different things. Like I love throwing a jig head minnow on forward facing sonar, but it's also super frustrating when that fish comes up and looks at it and it's like, I'm good, you know, and swerves on it
that was my
and
entire weekend.
yeah. And so like that's frustrating.
Yeah.
But to me, like ice fishing is one of those prime examples where like you don't have the ability to move over to that
No.
rock pile, or
Nope.
you know, you're kind of set up, so you want to make those, you know, those presentations efficient. So you know, one thing we talked about before we get on here is that Eagle i9. It's not going to be like, to me, it's not the equivalent of like LiveScope or the Mega Live or any of those. It's a little bit different. It doesn't ping as much, so you're not getting as much information as quickly. Some people like that because you're not pinging a fish. They're not, you know, if they are used to that pinging and they kind of get spooked, you're not pinging them as much. So that may be something that, you know, maybe someone starts out with an Eagle Eye 9 knowing that they want to get, because like the rants, you can switch, you know, from that Eagle Eye 9 to that next step up and kind of, you know, switch over. But that would be a great starting spot if you're not 100%, you know. But again, typically going back to forward facing sonar, you know, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. One, mounting, you know, the box or the you know, that runs that system, having more power for that system. That forward facing definitely comes with a lot more setup, accessories, and different stuff like that too.
Yeah, and like I said, so we did, and I'll pop it up on screen here, kind of a side-by-side view with my buddy who just bought the new LiveScope and then my Eagle Eye. Again, I've had the most success with my Eagle Eye ice fishing because it is giving you live like little blips, but the picture just isn't near as clear. Like the fish, and I'm using a tiny little jig, and what I found is like a crappie that's maybe like 4 inches or 5 inches. They almost look the same size, whereas on a live scope you can kind of zoom out and you're getting a better idea of how big a fish is or whatever. But it's been successful for me, like when I've taken the Eagle Eye out on my own, but it just doesn't give you as wide as a picture either. Your cone is much more narrow.
Yeah, so going back, kind of like which, you know, fish finder is best for you. You know, consider what type of fishing you're doing. You know, JT and I aren't going to get the same fish finders. You know, if he's ice fishing and I'm fishing the kayak. One thing too is like plan a budget, but you know, you're gonna need a fish finder mount, you're gonna need a transducer mount, and then you're gonna need a battery, whether that's lithium, whether that's a lead acid. And what I would look at is like how many amps per hour that fish finder is drawing, and then plan accordingly. You know, if that fish finder is driving half an amp and you want to be able to fish 8 hours, you're gonna need, you know, 5 to 6 amp hour battery. But do that research on there. Again, going back, you know, to what you're putting on, kind of think about that stuff. Like ice fishing, I don't even know what kind of mounts you guys would need. I'm sure there's some special mounts that go over the ice hole.
Yeah, just a lot of times it's like Summit is one of the big brands. It's just an ice shuttle. So if you're mounting it to a kayak, you need some sort of arm. That'll usually amount to an accessory rail on your kayak. It's no different for ice fishing. You're just getting a pole that's got 3 legs that you set down over the hole, and then you can move it. You can fish down the same hole, or a lot of times I'll drill a hole right behind and then drill a hole to drop my line down, just so when you're reeling up, you don't got to pull it out. And then you just throw it on like any sort of ice shuttle or a shuttle bag and just kind of make it mobile. So that part's easy, but I mean, all that stuff, you know, you're talking about a couple $100 by the time you buy the arms and the bags for it. And that's just the transition from your kayak gear. So it's probably a couple $100 entry for each one, right? Like your ice shuttle to your kayak shuttle. So there's possibly $300 to $400 just in that gear. You mentioned the batteries. I know the Lowrance I ran for like 7 hours on a 4 amp hour battery and still had some battery left. So one advantage of that again is you probably don't need a huge lithium battery for that one. It's not pulling as much power, obviously, but and then even just to jump back to, like we were talking about, what's the best fish finder that will work for you? People, I think, always kind of try to look for like a comparison between like, I'm going to compare the LiveScope to the Mega Live to the Lowrance Active Target. Which one's the best? I mean, realistically, quality-wise, I don't know if there's a huge difference between all of those. Once you get to those high-end ones, they're all kind of built on the same premise. I think I would suggest is, do you have a current fish finder brand that you already use? Then that might just be the best one for you because you know the language of the finders.
Yeah. You know, I've had Lowrance. I've never had Humminbird. Lowrance was kind of like their system to me, and it was an older system that wasn't like as user friendly. Where like whenever I switched over to Garmin, the touchscreen was huge. That's maybe a feature that you want to like.
Yeah, mine's not. The Lowrance Eagle Eye's not touchscreen.
So that's kind of something to consider too. To me, like I prefer Garmin. I'm used to Garmin. I like Garmin. I like how it all works together. I'll, probably stay with Garmin as long as I can. I've heard as far as side imaging, that Humminbird is tough to beat. Like their side imaging is super good. The
other thing to consider too is if you have a Minn Kota motor, Humminbird finders can talk to that motor for like autopiloting to places on your map. And that's only Humminbird, I believe.
Tarova. Yep. Yeah, that Tarova, that new kayak, the Kayak Tarova, will integrate into there. I do like the fact like Humminbird offers their GPS puck, and it's not, you don't have to wire it in. It's Bluetooth, which is kind of nice. You just got to wire power to it. But again, these are all like accessories that you may want to look on down the road too. If you're really concerned about having the best of both worlds, maybe at that point you get a Garmin and with LiveScope, and you get a Humminbird with side imaging. That to me, again, it's all going to be situational to, what your goals are and what your plans are on all that.
Yeah, and we're talking space then, right?
Correct.
What kayak are you on? Like, I mean, you got to mount the arms, the finders, and the black box, like for the Garmin. Like, they're all like, it takes up a lot of space too. So if you're someone who doesn't like me, I'm not a huge fan of clutter. Like, I have a hard time deciding what to bring, and just be aware if you're in a kayak that doesn't have a lot of accessory space. Yeah. Like I had the Jackson Bite for a little bit, really fun kayak, super nimble, fast, fun, maybe like 20 inches of accessory rail space on the whole kayak, and really nowhere to mount extra accessories. So it's just, those are all things you need to bring into consideration.
Yeah, I remember when you came down a couple years ago, and we went to Lake Niangua, and you got into my PA, and you're like, "What do I do with all this?" Mine's overkill. But again, I'm fishing kayak tournaments. I want all this stuff, and I probably have too much. I probably need to taper back at some point. But yeah, definitely consider. And when we were talking about ice fishing stuff, I have seen guys take those ice fishing kits and then integrate them into their kayak, which is pretty smart, because a lot of those ice fishing kits, it'll hold that monitor, it'll hold that battery, and then at that point it's just a matter of running your wires for your transducers and stuff like that. So that would be cool and something to consider.
Well, funny enough, I brought my buddies down for the Big Bass 250, and he was fishing out of that Jackson Bite, but that's exactly what he did. He just brought his Garmin ice shuttle down and bungeed it to the front of that kayak, and then we modified my the Railblaza arm for it. So like we found a way, and that is an option. Like especially like this year I'll be fishing out of the New Canoe Unlimited mostly. I mean, honestly, now that we're talking about it, maybe that's what I do. I might not even transition it off of my ice shuttle, and I might just set that bag in front, do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those platforms that you get so much room and flat area to put it on. And I'm sure there's ways to adapt it to track as well if you want it a little bit more secure, but for sure. But definitely do your research, figure out what accessories, what priorities are for you, and then don't just stop there. Go to that next step and say, how am I going to mount this? I know so many people get a fish finder like, well, what do I need next? And depending on your kayak and how you want to set up, you may be spending another $300-400 to get that the way you want, between a battery mount, transducer mount, all that stuff. So definitely do that research on there. Like I said, depending on the kayak, a lot of these kayaks, they'll they're coming with like Old Town Tobies. They're coming with places to run the cables. You may need through-hole ports based on where you want to set it up and run it in through your kayak as well. But as much information that you can get on that fish finder, look at how you're going to mount that. Yak Hobby is a prime example. They make a bunch of transducer mounts for kayaks, whether they're scupper ones, whether they're bolt-on. And that way you can eliminate drilling into that kayak, especially putting a transducer on the bottom. Anytime you can eliminate that, that'll, save you a lot of headache and all that. But yeah, you can get as simple or as crazy as you want with these. And to me, again, it just goes back to, if you're looking at getting your first fish finder, don't go get out a 9-10 inch screen. Look for a 5 or 7 that's going to have side and down, and start out there. Learn that. Take that time to learn that, and then you can progress to that bigger stuff. If that's the end goal. If it's not, you may be able to get a smaller unit, save some money, and be perfectly fine. Or say, hey, I want to do this further on. Make sure it's compatible with those forward-facing sonars or whatever you're trying to do.
I think that's a great advice for like entry level. For $400 or $500, you could get really good side imaging, learn how to use it, and that's going to give you a picture. And then even if you want to go to forward facing, that side scan would still be useful if you want to run both and have a really clear picture, so you could build upon that. But I agree. I mean, we talk all the time about not jumping into the most expensive thing all the time right off the bat. Like, you need to get in and figure out what you like, what you don't like, and then build off of there, so you're not looking at like a $2,500 mistake sitting in your garage getting you in trouble at home or something.
And even like those little 4-inch screens for some of these throw and go kayaks, maybe you're doing river stuff, like you want something light, like those are awesome. Like Humminbird, Garmin, they all make a smaller 4-inch. Some of these 4-inches are going to come with mapping too, depend on the, you're still $200-$300 on that, and that's not crazy. I know we don't sell them, but I know guys that have bought like the deeper Sonar, which is a little sonar pod that'll actually connect to your phone. And maybe that's a route for you to start out and say, hey, do I even want fish, like a fish finder? Do I want this? Like, maybe all you're wanting is water temp, and maybe you just go buy a thermostat and hang it over the boat. Just do some water temp, like stuff like that. Like, just thinking it doesn't have to be overkill. Just look at what you're wanting. Even those 5-inch screens, you're looking at $300-$400 depending on what accessories or what imaging you want. And to me, those are great units to start out with.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if we went into the details enough to like make people feel like they're necessarily making the most informed. So if you have more questions, like just drop them in the comments or in the description. I'll include my email as well and other ways to reach us. Honestly, don't make a purchase if you're not 100% sure. Reach out and we can give you way more specific information. You can tell us like how you like to fish, where you like to fish, what kayak you're using, and we can kind of help hopefully match you a little bit better.
Yeah, we can put the storefront number on here. I work here full time. I actually have a Hobie in here that I'm rigging up. We rigged up a crazy XTR the last couple weeks he put a 16-inch graph on there, forward facing sonar. He's doing the Garmin Force current motor. So he's ended up spending like, just under $20,000 worth of stuff. Like it can get carried away pretty quick.
The lines are getting blurred for sure.
Yeah, you can definitely, and of course the XTR is one of those boats where you can easily do that stuff.
16 inches. Is that the biggest screen you've done?
That is.
At what point is it just like a TV monitor? Is it coming?
It was pretty close. Remind me, I'll send you a picture of it because I got him sitting in the boat in the shop, like just geeked out because he's got this monitor.
Yeah.
Kind of the cool thing, he could hook up HDMI to it, and I mean, he could probably get the football game out there.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, man, I might be able to convince my boys to come with me more than if they can hook up their Switch too and watch their shows with me. That's crazy.
Do it.
Yeah. Marry everything to what you want, what your strategy is, and where you're going. I think that's really everything comes down to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I think this would be great for someone just getting into it, looking or looking to upgrade, kind of what things to look for too. But just learning that language of, the DI, the SI, the CV, SV, all that is simple. And at least you can kind of filter that stuff and go through there. Again, you're always welcome to call the storefront here, 5738-732-772. I could walk you through of what you're wanting to do, but then on top of that, what you're going to need to install that onto your kayak. And kind of tips, whether, pointers, how I've seen them, what I would recommend. Again, like, people looking at down imaging, you can mount those transducers inside the kayak, and then you don't even have to mess with, you know, some sort of mount and stuff like that. Just going into the bottom of the kayak. So there's definitely a finder for everyone. It's just a matter of, you know, what you're looking at and what your goal is.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you could, I mean, I hate even saying that. Saying like and subscribe always just makes me feel so. Just laugh. Yeah, it is, right? But if you can, that would be helpful for us. Or quite honestly,
sure.
I'd rather see comments. Like on comments and questions. That's what helps us the most. So, all right, we're gonna get back in this a little bit more regular. So, thanks everybody.